Next week's budget is in better shape than expected as the federal government undertakes a major spending audit to significantly improve the bottom line. But of course, commodities remains the big story and they are serving us well. Reining in spending on the NDIS will be watched pretty closely on budget night, as well as how far the Treasurer goes on job seeker. Joining me now is economist and founder of Rich Insight, Chris Richardson. Good to see you, Chris. So give us your little bumper sticker take on what this budget's going to look like, first of all.
Stunning amounts of tax revenue, but it's all temporary, and that makes the politics tricky. The budget looks wonderful. It may not quite reach a surplus this year, but it'll go very, very close to that. And even ongoing deficits smaller than expected. But the basic message from the Treasurer that the good news is temporary, the bad news is permanent, is right, and the challenges remain.
So what is the biggest challenge for a Labor government? This is Jim Chalmers' technically his second budget. Of course, there's competing interests. He wants to walk that line between, fiscal constraint, but also being generous to people that would expect that a Labor government would expect to be generous too. So job seeker comes to mind.
Yeah, and you're saying basically they need to do two things at the same time. They need to walk and chew gum. On the one hand, there are areas where Australia has significant fairness fails, job seeker being the absolute standout there. That should definitely be done. And yet, even though that costs money, there is a great case to repair the budget, helps take some pressure off the Reserve Bank, and more importantly, helps fight the next crisis.
Right, so winter is coming for the economy, as you put it in your report. Slowdown is gathering pace. So, as you say, we're getting close to a surplus, but we're not really in the bad times as far as the forecasts go.
The budget is dancing on the ceiling.
Yeah.
This is somewhere close to as good as it gets. You have to go back to before Australia was a nation, a century and a half, to find a time when the world economy threw this much money at us. And that's great. It has seen a stunning budget turnaround, but it is ultimately temporary. The economy will slow. The good news in the budget will go away, partly from the economy slowing, mostly because those crazy commodity prices, what we get from selling stuff to the world, that will gradually go down.
Yeah, but we've been hearing that from successive governments for quite some time, that the commodities boom's not going to last, and we always have treasurers. Josh Frydenberg did it too. I expect Jim Chalmers to do it, undercook the commodity price. But that slowdown hasn't really come. Why do you say that is coming?
So the economics would suggest that the short-term impact of Russia invading Ukraine sends up the price of food and fuel, the things that Australia sends to the world. Ultimately, though, it sees the world scrambling to move away from fossil fuels. And that's already happening. Europe's made big strides. So the combination says commodity prices go down, but they don't go down at anything like the speed that Treasury's been writing in. So the budget was at the end of October last year. They said by the end of March this year, a 5-month period, that thermal coal would go down 86% in price. They've been overdoing it in part because that gives Treasury a hollow log to call upon if they need it around where the budget sits.
So, Chris, can the government in this budget afford to spend big if it starts to tackle those structural deficits in those big spending programs, if you like? It's going to be hard to do in defence because we've seen all these announcements, but the NDIS does come to mind.
Absolutely, and it comes to the walk and chew gum point. There are areas where they need to spend more. There are areas where they need to spend less, and there are areas where they need to tax more. Doing all of those things is politically very difficult. It requires courage. It loses them votes. The very discussion around JobKeeper, and I'm a passionate supporter of doing better on that front. But to be clear, governments who do something lose votes. They lose some political capital off the back of it. So getting that juggle right is very tricky, and the news on the budget right now is so magnificent, it complicates that politics further.
Job seeker is one thing as well, but what has been a little bit lost in the commentary in the lead up to the budget as well is this lamito, however you want to phrase it, is coming off. So it's going to effectively feel like a tax hike for low and middle income earners getting that subsidy, isn't it?
Yeah, and a huge one at that. To be clear, I don't think the government should extend that tax offset. It was doubled up and then added to further again for temporary reasons. This restores back to the tax cut that low and middle income taxpayers got. But the dollars are huge. It's about $11 billion a year that won't be in tax returns in July, August, September this year, 23, compared to where they were last year. And although the government will, take $11 billion on the one hand and hand back energy subsidies, it sounds like something around single mothers, something maybe over 55s on job seekers, perhaps a few other things. Basically, the government will be taking money out of the economy.
Yeah, okay. Finally, before we let you go, Chris, always good to talk to you. Interest rates, it is RBA day, as we like to call it. Where are rates heading today? And do you have a prediction for the next 12 months?
Markets say they won't go up. Most economists say they won't go up. I think there's a chance, partly because jobs are still so magnificent here in Australia. Either way, though, whether they go up today or not, we increasingly look as though we are at the top on interest rates.
Chris Richardson, great to see you.
Thanks, Laura.